the USAID topic. One of the journalists who talked about USAID and his influence in Nigeria and Jonathan and everybody is David Hundeyin. I've had him on my podcast twice. Respect him. I think he's one of the, best investigative journalists we have in Nigeria as per what he's tried to uncover in the country. He's a really nice guy. I don't know what you think about him, but really nice guy, great guy. David, he's very eloquent. He's talked about these issues. And I feel like there seems to be some sort of rivalry between you and him. You know who I'm talking about, right? David Hundeyin. Journalist, you know what I'm talking about.
Let me tell you.
What's the issue?
Let me tell you something. And I find it very fascinating. After I started Sowore Reporters, every big journalist said they won't succeed.
Yeah.
I remember when I interviewed Obasanjo's son, Gbenga Obasanjo, which was the beginning of Sowore Reporters in 2006. Reuben Abati was probably the biggest journalist, columnist in Nigeria at that time. He wrote this skating in this thing that I wasn't practicing journalism. It was ambush. And then every other website that emerged after Sowore Reporters, first of all, take a poke shot at Sowore. Sowore is terrible, or they'll write something negative about me. I can't count now, but all of them. And I realized that is what happened to Pathfinders. You will be, there's this quotation I have under my email. It's, I think it was Arthur Schopenhauer. He said, every truth confronts, goes through 3 stages. So one, you're ridiculed. And secondly, I think you are threatened. And finally, it becomes self-evident. I met David by accident. I didn't know who he was. One day he wrote me that
he wrote to you?
Yeah, he sent me a message that he had a big story that he was working on, and the platform he was working with had chickened out. He wanted to write about the Minister of Communication, Pantami. Some investigative report he had cobbled together. And they said, please, can you help use Sowore Reporters to police it? I can't wait, because that's always been me. I support any new idea. And that's like you mentioned that I helped you. When cable was being set up, I did help them. People's Gazette, Premium Times. I was the first person who was using Premium Times story that became a household name. And everybody was like, Premium Times is bigger than you. I said, there's enough space. Yeah. So, and that's how I met him. And that story was published. It went viral on Sowore. So then what happens to people over time is not something I look back at. I generally don't even accept comparisons. I'm like, who is greatest? Like you said, he's the greatest investigative journalist.
One of the best, certainly.
Yes.
One of the best in Nigeria.
That is the way it should be. That's how I saw myself when I started Sowore Reporters. And then now you're saying there's a better person.
No.
Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that should be the natural progression of a society. The younger ones should be better than the ones that are older. I'm old now. I don't even do investigative reporting anymore. But I'm glad that even some of the materials that I created became useful to some of them to be where they are today. For instance, the Tinubu's drug story, I was the first to put it out in 2000. I bought Tinubu's drug story from Chicago, from an Illinois high court. It was a federal court in Illinois. I bought it from the archive for $76 in 2008 and put it out. That was the material from which everybody who is talking about his drug history, that was the first documented hard copy that was placed online. You can quote me any day, anywhere. Every other thing that is written about it emerged from that source. But I was probably not the first to know about it. I think some other people have written about it even before me. But the first person to ever put Tinubu's drug history online was myself as Sowore Reporters. Nobody can dispute that. And my life was endangered when I was doing it. But the nature of myself is that I don't complain about certain things. When I go and create some problem, I know the consequences. So I'm not going to tell you that somebody's after me. I knew they would be after me.
Yeah.
I've created enough enemies to last me for the rest of my life. So that in my view is my response to that. But rivalry, I don't see it that way. I don't rival people. People, but I understand the nuances of people saying, who's Sowore, who doesn't take his, we're better than him. Of course. I want everybody to be better than me. This podcast we're doing, I tried to start in New York.
Yeah.
Through what I call Sowore FM radio.
Okay.
I was one of the first person to arrange microphones like this to a Nigerian audience. It used to be called Sowore FM.
Wow.
We interviewed Ebenezer Obey, we interviewed K1, Nice. We're trying to make it the softer side of Sowore. But now you do it better than I could ever imagine. Honest Bunch did it better than I've ever. It's a lot of people, because at that time, we didn't know how to go about it. There was a time I was trying to have a proprietary live stream for Sowore reporters. I spent money on it and all that. One guy called me one day, a friend of mine, said, any problem that has been solved, don't invest your money in it. I said, go and register on YouTube.
Yeah.
Now YouTube became the biggest
of course,
TV station in the world a few years later.
Yeah.
So that's the way I say it. Everybody that can do this better, please.
Yeah, I just wish David, who I know personally, I know him, like I said, personally, really, really great. I wish, you and he yourself, rather than all this back and forth on Twitter against,
back and forth between me and him.
I think he referenced in one of his tweets. I can't remember.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Look, it's just like wishing me will be friends with police. You can't get me past my experience with police.
Yeah.
So Shoyinka said something to me that would never leave me. And it was when I first started getting close to him, and I knew Shoyinka before he left Nigeria, but he didn't know who I was. But when I traveled to the US in 1999, a few years later, I met him in the UK, and that's how we became very close again. And he said, even after he won the Nobel Prize, there was a professor of his in his former university in the UK who still hates him to today. He gave me his name. Say, until that guy dies, there's nothing Shoyinka can do. You would always have people like that in your life.
Yeah.
You understand? People that can never explain why they hate you. Or they will offer one or two explanations why they don't like you. That is their nature. So there are people who are called iconoclasts. They hate icons. Do you know that I belong in that category? So sometimes people say to me, this is the most beautiful person. Like, no. I have a problem with Beyonce.